Hey, I'm Julie, Fei-Fan Balzer, and today I'm going to show you how to use Canvas Workspace for Mac in order to create your own custom box file, which uses both cuts and perforations to make a perfectly folded up box. You're going to see just how easy it is.
I'm here in Canvas Workspace for Mac. This is the downloadable version of Canvas Workspace. It will work very similarly if you use Canvas Workspace for PC. Again, the downloadable version. This is not the cloud version that you use in a browser. This is the kind you download to your computer. So when I build a box, the first thing I like to do is I like to lay out my pieces, and they're very hard to see when they just have the outline. So I like to make sure I'm going to raise the opacity on the fill layer, and I'm going to lower the opacity on the line layer. So now I just have a really easy to see square. So I want to figure out what the footprint of my box is. And so for the sake of argument, we're just going to leave it here at the default size that the square comes in at. But if you wanted to adjust that size, you can go right up to the edit menu. And let's say you wanted to make it 4 by 4. So there you go. Now it's a 4 by 4 square. So your box is going to be a 4 by 4 box. But you could make it, again, any size you wanted. You could also adjust the size by dragging at the corner. It's totally up to you. Okay, so this is the bottom of our box. So we know that we're going to need sides. And if we want a square box, then we're going to need 4 sides that are also these 4 by 4 squares. So I am going to hold down the Option key on my keyboard, and I'm going to drag the box. This is going to create a second box. I am going to repeat that 3 more times. So Option key, click, drag, release. Option key, click, drag, release. Option key, click, drag, release. So if I just lay this out really roughly, and let's make the base color a different color. So I'm going to go back to properties, choose the fill, and change it, let's say, to this pink. That'll just allow us to see things a little bit more clearly. So each of the sides, and this is obviously rough, I'm not worried about whether it's overlapping. This is just how I like to design things so I get a sense of it. So each of these sides, right, is going to have to connect to each other. So I know that I'm going to have to add some kind of flap onto here, right, which will then get glued onto the sides. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a box. And again, I'm going to increase the opacity on the fill, and I'm going to decrease the opacity on the line. And then let's click fill again, and let's make this a different color yet again so that we can see it. So I know if I go up to edit that the height of this piece must be 4 inches because that's the same as the height as everything else. But in terms of width, I just need it to be a little piece, right? This is just going to be a little flap that can fold in and attach here. Now, I know that one of the things that will make this easier for this to fold in and hide is if it's not quite square, if it sort of dips in a little bit. So let me zoom in, going up here to the zoom tool so that you can see what I'm about to do. So I want to single click in the middle of my shape while it's selected. This is going to reveal the path editing tools. So I want to click on this little node right here. You can see it turns blue. And I'm going to use the arrow keys on my keyboard, and I'm going to hit the arrow down key 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe I'll go 5 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I'm going to do the same thing here at the bottom node. I'm going to click on it so that it turns blue. And then I'm going to hit the up arrow key 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now you can see I have a shape that narrows in so that when this flap folds in, right, it will be able to be glued and glued and glued and glued and glued if I attach a flap to each side. So I'm not going to do that work a million times. I'm going to show you how we're going to do that work once, but let's go back 1 second more. Okay, so I can see my overall huge box here, sort of the basics of it laid out. I know that I'm going to need a flap and that every single one of these is going to need a flap so that it attaches to the next one. The other thing is, unless this box is totally open, it's going to need a lid. So the lid is also going to be 4x4, right? So it fits. So I'm just going to copy the bottom to make my life a little bit easier. So I'm going to go click on to that pink one, hit the Option key, and click and drag. Okay, so if this is going to be my lid, I'm already off the mat and I know that. That's fine. We can fix it later. This is also going to need those tabs probably on 3 sides, this time just to tuck into the box rather than to be glued to anything, but it's still going to need some kind of tabs. So I have laid out the basic ideas, but the issue is I can't actually cut these squares, right? Because it's just going to cut out as squares. So what I need to do is I need to create these long shapes with perforation lines dividing where they're going to fold. So here is how I like to do that. So first of all, I want to make sure that this design is going to fit onto my mat. So that's the first thing I want to do is I want to select all of these parts. I'm just clicking and dragging on the background to select all of the parts. And then I'm going to resize them so that they fit on the mat. And that's kind of going to determine the size of my box. So I've done that just to drag them, and you can be a little bit generous because you can always size up later. Okay. Now, the next step, and let me zoom in, is let's see how big each of these has ended up being. So each of these is 2.76, which is a really funny size. So let's just make it 2.75. Okay, I just hit the return key and you can see the height change at the same time because that's an easier number to work with. So now I know that in this row, I'm going to need 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces that are 2.75 inches in terms of width. In terms of height, they're still going to stay 2.75. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make one piece, which is 2.7 times 4 is 11. So I'm going to make this one piece, and I'm going to turn off the aspect ratio so that only the width changes. So you see how that I unchecked the maintain aspect ratio button. So I'm going to change this width to 11. So now I have this big piece that's 11 inches. So I'm going to remove these pieces to kind of save for later, because I might need them as a ruler. But here is the big centerpiece. Now, I want to determine where this goes, right? Because this has to go, these few pieces on the side have to go somewhere on here. Now, math-wise, just do this with me for a second. I know that this is 2.75 by 2.75, this is 2.75 by 2.75, and in the center, this should also be 2.75. So now I need a strip which is 3 of these long. So it'll be 2.75 wide, but it will be 3 times 2.75, which is 8.25. So I'm going to choose one piece of it. I'm going to resize the width to 2.75 and then I'm going to change the height to 8.25. And again, my aspect ratio is off. So now I have this big, long piece. So again, I'm going to save these pieces for reference. They just hang out down here. So now I'm trying to determine how to fit this on here. So that's where these become very useful yardsticks, basically. But you'll notice this has disappeared and I can't see it behind the pink thing. So I want to change the order. So this is the layers palette over on the right side. I'm going to click on that and I can now bring this black shape just by clicking and dragging it up to the front. So now that it's in the front, what I'm going to do is I could manually align it here, but that's like, I'm not that good at it. So instead, I'm going to select these 2 parts and I'm going to go to the edit menu and I'm going to left align and I'm going to bottom align. So now I know that these are lined up. So now all I need to do is just visually drag this larger piece over so that it touches. And if you want to zoom in, you can also use your arrow key, but that looks good to me. But I also need to determine whether or not this is centered. But since I know there's only 3 parts and it just needs to be centered, I don't need to use a ruler like with this one. All I need to do is select these 2 parts just by dragging over them. I want to center align them. So I want to center align horizontally. And now I know that that's in the center. So I can move my ruler piece. And I'm going to select these 2 pieces that are making up a sort of a plus sign here, and I'm going to weld them together. So now this is the basic form of my box. The only thing I'm missing, if you said this little red flap, you got it. I'm missing this little red flap piece. So what I want to do is I want to zoom in as close as I can. And I want to go into the layers palette and make sure that the red shape is in the very front so that I can really see it. And then I also want to go into the properties panel and I want to change the fill so that it's transparent. And the reason I want it to be transparent is because now I can see if I'm overlapping. I can see if I'm overlapping because I want to make sure that I am. So since I know that I'm overlapping, I'm going to use the arrow keys to just get it so it's barely overlapping. So you see that it's still overlapping, but it's only just. The other thing is I want to make sure that my flap is perfectly lined up. So I'm going to select the flap and the outer piece. I'm going to go up to the edit menu and I'm going to bottom align. Now I know that these 2 pieces are perfectly aligned. Now I can add 1 flap to each of these sides, or I can just add 2 flaps, one here, and one here, and that will basically cover me. So I think I'm going to do that just for the sake of ease. So I'm going to go Option. Wait, I'm going to click off first because you want nothing selected. Then I'm going to go Option, click, select, and I'm dragging this piece up. And before I attach it, I want to go ahead and select both of these parts and I want to weld them together. Then I'm going to take this part, make sure that I see an overlap, select both parts. I want to top align them to make sure that they're aligned. Then I'm going to use the arrow key to see how small I can get that overlap. That looks great. Before I select both parts though, I want to duplicate this. So I'm going to Option key, click, drag, and then I'm going to select these 2 parts and weld it. So now my flap's on there. This needs to be flipped. So right over here on the right side, you can see that you can flip it horizontally. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm basically going to repeat the same process. I'm going to select both parts. I'm going to top align. Then I'm going to click on the little flap, get the overlap to be as small as possible. Before I weld, I'm going to Option, click, drag to make sure I have my duplicate, select both parts, and weld. Then I'm going to drag this flap on down. And oops. And I want to put it on here. So we're going to do the same thing where we select both parts. We're going to bottom align. Click on it, use the arrow keys to get it as small as possible. Before I weld, I'm going to Option, click to make sure that I have it so I can use it for the box top, because why do the work more than once? And there you go. So now I have all my flaps that are going to fold in so that I can glue, but I need to do the flaps for the box top. So I need to use my ruler one more time. Here you go. And I want to do the same alignment thing to make sure that this is perfectly placed. So I'm selecting both parts, right align, bottom align. Oops, I don't want to bottom align. I want to right align, and I want to center align. There you go. So now I know that this is a perfect ruler for me, but I don't want to accidentally attach it. So what I'm going to do is meaning when I weld, I don't want to accidentally weld it in. I want it to stay as a ruler. So what I'm going to do is I'm using the eyeball key, there you go, to find out which one this is. And so you can see you can toggle the visibility. So I know that that's the one I'm working with. In this empty box, I'm going to click lock. Now, there's nothing I can do to move this, delete. I can move what's on top of it, but I can't move that, which is exactly what I want. So that's stuck there, which is perfect. So now I can take my flap piece. I know that I need a flap at the end. And then if I do Option, click, I know that I need a flap at the bottom, so I want to rotate that 90 degrees, and I can do that in the Edit panel. I will rotate it, angle 90 degrees. There you go, just like that. I'm going to Option, click, because I want one more, and I want to flip that vertically. There you go. So now I have all these pieces. So I can use my arrow keys. Well, actually, let's just drag these into place. We'll do our alignment and then weld. So now I don't really need this square anymore, or at least not at the moment. So I'm going to go back into the layers palette, and I know it's the one with the lock, and I'm just going to turn it off so I don't have to look at it. Now, I want to align these three parts, right? 1, 2, 3. They all need to get aligned on the right side. Then I can use my arrow keys to make that overlap as tiny as possible, and I'm going to weld all three parts. Here, I want to select this, okay? And I want to center align it. Center align it. Then I'm going to use my arrow keys to get that to be as small as possible. I think I went too far. There you go. And now we're going to select both parts, and we're going to weld. So if I zoom out once more, you will see that we have our beautiful box, but it is missing its perforation lines. So that's what we need for it to be able to fold up. So how do I figure out where to place the perforation lines? Well, you still have your lovely rulers. All your rulers are here. So I can select these two parts and I can align them. And then I'm going to use the path tool. Click on that. I will draw a click. Then I will hold the Shift key to make sure it's straight. Go to the very end and double click. That will end my path. It's too short here. So if I look at the height, I know that this is going to be 8.25 because that's the size that we made it. So I can just type the height in right there. And you can see the line became longer. So now I'm going to use the arrow keys on my keyboard, and I'm just going to shift it up. You could drag it, but I tend to accidentally move it when I do that. So that's why I'm using the arrow keys. And I'm just holding the arrow key down in a single extended push instead of like endlessly hitting it over and over and over again. Now, the problem with this line that we have here is that it's a line and not a perforation line. So if you go up to the top where it says line dash pattern, you can change that now into a perforation line. It's just like that. If I click off, you'll see there is the perforation line, which is perfect. Now, if it's not quite in the right spot, the other thing you can do is you can select the line and the box, and you can just center align them. And that makes sure that they line up perfectly. Now I want to duplicate that line, but you see how I keep accidentally selecting the box instead of the line? So I'm going to go into the layers palette and I'm going to lock that box for just a moment. This is going to allow me to easily go ahead and now and click on, theoretically, there you go. I can just drag across there now without worrying about it. Click on the Option key and drag. Now, in terms of where to place this line, I can, once again, use my little rulers here because I can take one of these squares and I can line it up with the last one, and we can zoom in and really see what's happening, and that allows me then to click on the line and bring it over. The other key here is that you can see where these little triangles end for the little fold, so that's how you also know where basically the perforation line is. So once you're satisfied that the perforation line is in the correct spot, then it's time to add the next vertical perforation line. So once again, I'm going to click on this perforation line, Option, click, drag. Now it's too long for the hair, so we're going to go up into the Edit panel, and we know the height of that should be 2.75 because that was the height of our box, and we can once again drag that right into place. Now I can either use my little box tool here, or I can just visually see if it crosses these areas. Then I can grab this box down at the bottom, line it up, and see if it looks like this is in the right spot. It looks like it's not quite in the right spot. So I can use the arrow keys to move it until it's in the right spot. And I want to do an Option click on this in order to create another one for the flap over here. And then of course I can use my alignment tools to make sure that these are, I need to unlock this back layer, and then I'm going to use my alignment tools to make sure that they are all perfectly aligned. So now I have all the vertical lines that I need, but I need to do my horizontals. So I'm going to use the same method. I'm going to take this path tool and I'm going to click, hold down the Shift key so it's straight, double click at the end. And then I'm going to go up to the line and change it to a perforation. That looks great. So then I want to Option click on it and drag it and create another one. And I know that I need 2 more for these flaps that are identical. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to hold down the Shift key so that I've selected both of those perforation lines, use the Option key to bring them both over. Since I know that they're well spaced, drag it over, use my arrow keys as necessary. And there you go. Now I can delete just by selecting and hitting the delete key on my keyboard all of the parts I don't need. I can unlock and delete anything that's hidden. You do want to get rid of hidden layers because they potentially will show up. And then the very last thing that I want to do before I send this over to the cutter is I want to select all the parts and I want to group them by using Command G and see how it came up as a group. Because this now means, let me zoom out, that this is held together as a single solitary piece. So it means that I can adjust it as I want. So if you're not happy with how big this is and you wanted it to be bigger, you could use the 12 by 24 mat, but also if you rotate it, you can potentially make it slightly larger because when it cuts on this angle, there's a little bit more space given the way that it is shaped, like so. So now you actually can get a box that's a little bit bigger than that 2.75 inside measurement that we had. But all I need to do now is send this over to my cutter and cut out my fabulous new box.
So here's my finished box. cut out of orange and white paper. I think it looks great and it's functional and it's just the size that I wanted. So thanks so much for watching. For more tips, tricks, and tutorials, be sure to check out my blog at balzerdesigns.typepad.com. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check out my live online ScanNCut classes. Don't forget about the ScanNCut website, and I'll see you the next time.